All right. Welcome back to episode 7. 7 of these things, Joe. We missed
Seven
last
already.
week, though.
We did miss last week. Sorry about that.
We apologize. We were going to do the Duran wire, and we were going to do that again this week, but we ran into another hiccup with the Duran wire, so we're going to do the I threw a curveball at you, Joe.
You threw a big curveball at
So we're going to do the Donald White case, and he's pretty interesting, though. I think this is going to be one of the more interesting cases as far as there's a lot of unalivings that go down in this case.
That's a good way to say murder, right?
Right, Murder Inc.
I like it.
And before we get started, I always like to thank our sponsors at Keller Williams law firm, our buddy John Davis, and JD specializes in defense work now. He's been around the courtroom as a judge and as a prosecuting attorney. He's now focuses energy on defense, and the Keller Williams law firm can be located at kellerwilliams.com, with all your needs for any defense work, whether it be white collar crime, drug crimes, violent crimes, DWIs, things like that. So get a hold of kellerwilliams.com for all your needs in that. And we thank John and JD for his sponsorship.
Great guy.
Absolutely. And then where are we, Joe?
We are at my favorite place, Columbo's. It's Columbo Sports Bar and Grill. It's an old brick corner bar, as you can see. Like we grew up in many times on the south side of Chicago. But one little ancillary benefit to this place, I was walking in today and I saw a giant pizza on the table. And I'll tell you what, I'm a snob when it comes to pizza. I can't say that I'm a big St. Louis pizza guy.
You're an Emo's hater.
You're
an Emo's hater.
I don't like the cheeses. If you get mozzarella, it's a great pie. I love it.
Okay.
It reminds me of a pie in Chicago called I can't remember. But regardless, it was here, and I miss the pie here. It's very, very good. So if you ever come on down Manchester and you want to get a really, really good pie and a couple beers, come on into Columbus.
Dogtown. Foot of Dogtown.
Yeah, there was some nasty ass trees down from the little storm the other day.
Yeah, it kind of hit us hard.
It did.
Hopefully everybody's doing everybody. Yeah,
absolutely
praying
for all those people and St. Louis City first responders. They were badass. So got to give the mayor a shout out too. She did pretty good. So
everybody just doing what they can. That's all you can ask of people, and hopefully that they get all the help they need. And I know there's been a lot of volunteers that have gone down there that really shout out to them and the people that jumped into action.
They did.
It's not always the first responders. Sometimes it's the people that come after the first responders and really help people, try to get back to normal.
Yeah, it was really good to see the people of St. Louis not fighting about stupid shit and everybody getting together and helping those people out that lost their homes
and even down in the neighborhoods where there was a little bit of looting going on. I don't know that it was that much, but the neighborhood, they didn't put up with that. They called the police and they took video of them and the whole bit.
Good.
So that's always good to see. But on with the show, like I said, number 7, Donald White, Lil Donnie went by. And how was he tied into this group, Joe? This BMF group? Who were his little running buddies over the years?
Well, he's one of the originals from back in the day. Maybe not the primary guys, but some of the big names we talked about: Vacanto Johnson, Glenn Teague, Phil Snipes, Michael McGill.
Q. Michael McGill doesn't turn out well for him.
No, it doesn't.
Hear a little bit about that.
Unfortunately, the cars.
No.
So he was known at the beginning, but we had no idea.
Glenn Teague was another one that you're going to hear about today.
I mentioned him,
but
we had no idea the violence that this group was capable of. And what I think is really good about the story we're going to tell today is we're going to get into that. We're going to get into why we believe there was violence. And I think that's a great little kickoff. But what did you call these guys?
Murder Inc. And the reason I think is because of the old mobster days. Remember the mobster days?
Absolutely.
And these guys did it for, the normal, some of the things that may get you unalived in this business, or the being an informant, not having your money right, straight up dope robberies, which we're going to talk about. But these guys also did it for just cash.
Yeah.
So you could hire these guys out and Donald White and his boys, and you'll hear about a lot of them, and they'll step up to the plate. It costs about $10K per, but they got it done.
Is that what it was? $10K?
That's what we're hearing.
So one of the things we did, because we did get the curveball today, so I was scrambling this morning. And one of the things we did is we looked up some old Murder Inc. And if you guys don't remember, Murder Inc., about 1930s, 1941, 45, it changed name to just the Inc. on the Italian side. And the really neat thing about it is we wanted to compare street names.
There you go.
So
give me one. I'll give you one back.
All right, I'm going to give you one. Louis Lepke Buchalter. So Lepke is his name. That's a pretty good one.
I'll go with Mutt.
Mutt.
I'll go with Mutt.
Not as dynamic. And then we got Martin Bugsy, Buggssy.
I'm gonna pull
Goldstein.
I'm gonna pull the ace card out on you right here.
What do we got?
Shit.
Daryl
Clemens.
I don't think we should say anymore. But if you guys ever get the chance and want to compare something, the Murder Inc. TV shows and just the Wikipedia, just some of the information is great, and it gets into the whole story. And I think we're going to tie it into a little bit of the Q side and stuff in that. But these guys all fought too, Frank Costello and Vito Genovese, and you can draw some similarities to that. And I'm really glad that you're going to do the observations. But what happens when things don't go right? People die.
Right. And the feuds that start, it's just like the mafia. They feuded against each other, and unlike the mafia, the mafia claims that you had to get permission to kill people and blah blah blah. Where these guys they did what they had to do, and it's pretty interesting when doing the research on this, because a lot of this happened in the city,
right? As
a lot of you guys know, I was a former city officer, worked with Joe and the task force, and Joe was from DEA, and this one has more of a city flavor to it because there's a lot of homicides involved, and so I got to talk to a lot of my old comrades throughout this thing, and whenever you brought up the name Donald White, they're like, "Oh Jesus!"
Right,
and then they would go into, and then everybody like picked a different thing that they remembered.
Right,
and shout out to Eric Lanham too. Eric would work with us in Group 31. He was very involved. Unfortunately, he's out of town this week. But he remembered a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, he's been on trial quite a bit for some of the homicides.
He was also the lead, let's call him that, the lead investigator in the T.T. Jordan case. Yeah. So he's been involved in a lot of stuff, and we plan on having him on either next week or the week after.
That'll be very insightful.
Another case.
Yeah, very insightful. And it's kind of neat for me because this one we're kind of sitting back, and we're gonna get a lot of your buddies and some of the old conversations, and I think that's really good. And and if you can't follow along, it's kind of confusing for me too. So I'm gonna ask Tommy some questions as we're going there.
Right, and then the other thing that I wanted to, I will wait till the end of the show on that for the live thing, but Donald White, let's get into a little background. Donald's father was a guy by the name of.
You know what? Do me a favor, because we're going to talk about the degradation of why they started killing all these people. So we talked about this before the show. Give me your observations of why you think they went down this path.
So and looking into a lot of the stuff that's going on with this BMF faction and here in St. Louis, and especially the Q and the J both side, is when the dope was flowing, early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, the violence amongst these people was down. Because in my opinion, that dope's just flying in. Everybody's making money. Everybody's happy. As the BMF starts, taking hits, before long, obviously now they're all out there trying to do their own thing, where they were accustomed to that 1,000 pound or 1,000 pounds of or 1,000 kilos popping every month. Now that goes away, so now they're all on their own. And now, as you see, they start backstabbing each other, robbing each other. Everybody owes everybody money.
Right. They become jealous of each other.
Right. And that's just my observation as we go on.
I think it is, and it follows the story of Murder Inc., the Italian side as well. It really follows the same story with Frank Costello and Vito Genovese. They become entrenched, and things change. Like Costello will not get involved in drugs, and Vito does, and it causes this rift. And it's identical. You can see the egos come through, and the void. People are starting to try to fill the void because Q's gone. The BMF has gotten hit. The supply chain has been disrupted, and this is a necessary evil, or an unnecessary evil, but a necessary evil to them, trying to rebalance the whole trade. And then what else it does, and this is the part that we talked about and I really like, it opens the door for a flood of law enforcement. When you create violence, you bring the brothers in blue all day long.
That, and everybody's starting to make mistakes. You're more apt to make mistakes when that well-oiled machine gets shut down.
Right.
They make more mistakes, and we were there. We were lucky enough to pounce on them, and you guys are going to hear about a lot of that. But there's a lot of great work that was done here by our St. Louis City Homicide.
Absolutely.
And along with the FBI, and everybody's just throwing in information, and they solved 3 or 4 murders here that we're going to talk about. Talk about another couple beefs, and
okay.
But one of the things we'll start with is Donald, who was Donald White, and Donald. Like I said earlier, his father was Tommy Red Lathan, no stranger to the game. I don't know that he was quite as violent as his son turned out to be. And then his mom was a lady by the name of Willie Mae Allen. Used to be Willie Mae White, but Willie Mae Allen, and she was no stranger to the game. So, and when you have 2 parents that are in the game, there's a good chance you're going to be in the game. And he might have tried to take it to another level than them.
Where did they grow up?
North Side. So the Horseshoe was the first time that Donald White was known. He gets picked off here and there, but a little bit. But early, I think it was about 2005, 2004. I didn't get the exact dates, but Mark Bianalino, who was in the most violent offenders unit in the city of St. Louis, they used to ride that Horseshoe area in the 7th District. For those of you who don't know, it's on the north side. And the reason they call it the Horseshoe is because the street was an actual horseshoe.
Okay.
And it was crazy. It was a crazy area. But that's where he gets locked up there. Mark and the crew up there, and his crew. And I used to work with a lot of those guys in that unit. I don't remember this particular arrest, but I remember he had Mark was saying he had a big old Silverado truck, and inside the truck was a trap
I remember.
Right. The passenger, and this ties into our group.
Right.
Because there was a gun in the air bag was filtered out, or was removed and made into a trap.
Right. And for our listeners that may not know what a trap is, concealed compartment. We talked about them before. You put the turn signal on, you roll the window up, and you hit a button to defrost.
I think this one was magnet operated.
Yeah. Weren't they over by the glove box?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. This particular
I remember. And those were the gun traps.
Right.
Okay.
So Donald gets locked up for that. He goes away for a little bit. And so when he goes away, but there was Group 31 with the group we're in. One of our guys was at the time, they heard about the drug dealing of Donald White and, all the stuff that was going on. So they were, they had a in to his mom, just buying a little dough from his mom. And obviously they thought that it was coming from Donald. And that was the normal, but they could get on his mom's phone, but they couldn't get to Donald's just yet.
Correct.
So they had all the paperwork prepared to get on mama's phone. And Donald gets locked up, so that was all just washed away because Donald's gone.
And it was probably, in our case, when we were humping pretty heavy back then.
Yes.
That was the first mother or family wiretap we tried to embark upon. But the work that goes into that, and Jack talked a little bit about it last time he was here on a Federal Friday.
Months.
God, the work that goes into it, it's months and months of work. And
all got chucked out when he went to prison. That's the way the game works.
It does.
But one of the things they found out in that is they found a business card of some sort in the truck.
Okay.
Which led them to a guy, I guess we'll call him the Lung, and the Lung had an automotive place. That was his nickname, and he did traps, and the Lung ends up getting arrested, and he did traps for Glenn Teague and and Donald White was the guy who discovered the Lung. And then he turned on a lot of his partners to it, Glenn Teague, Oscar Dillon, a lot of these guys, from what we're understanding. And then this guy became their trap guy. Well, the trap guy, got locked up. So what happens. But nothing really happened with these guys because things go on. And, but now the beefing gets to starting. Which beef you want me to start? I'll go just through a quick beef.
I got a question about the traps.
Yep.
So we talked about the traps with the BMF, and we know that the BMF was kind of instrumental in the traps. And when we were coming up through the day, and we really didn't know the BMF, how big they were, but we started to see traps filter down here, and the little trap shops. And they were usually they would do rims and tires, and they weren't wrapping cars back then, but they were doing stereos, and then they would do these traps, these surreptitious traps behind the scenes, and it kind of exploded.
Yep.
And those were mostly, white guys from the suburbs that I remember. They would come out here and set up these places and do them. And then we saw the Mexicans come, and the much more sophisticated. And then
larger. These were more pocket. The ones that are more local are more pocket traps.
Okay.
You know, that you maybe fit a gun, 2 keys, something. You know.
And what do you think? I want to go with, God, we must have identified at least 5 or 6.
Oh yeah.
At least, right?
Yeah.
All right.
When the lung had him, yeah, he did some work. So we'll just leave it at that.
There you go.
And
I love the street names, by the way.
I love the lung. But the first beef he starts. The first beef that we're learning about, and this is going to be a quick one because is James Williams. He went by Blue.
Yep, Blue.
And Blue and just like you were talking about that jealousy, and what everybody's thinking is that him and Donald White were tight at one time, and now the dope's going a different direction, and now they're kind of beefing. And back in May of 2009, some of the associates of Donald White were leaving the Yogati concert that was at the Club Society that night, right by Union Station down there. And 3 guys, unfortunately, lost their lives, and was Alan Jones, DeJuan Moore, and Byron Blassingame.
Oh, wow.
And so they get shot there in front of Union Station. Pretty gruesome. I think one makes it out of the car but doesn't make it far. Well, right away, this is Blue is identified as the man who set this up.
Okay.
This James Williams. Well, James Williams is going to get married shortly thereafter, and he's got the chase.
I remember
he's got the chase out for his wedding. He's going to do it big time, and $35K. And they said there ain't no way because we're all going to be sitting ducks. But then there was another. I was talking to 2 guys, and one said it was Blue that called it off, and one said it was the chase. Somebody got some information at the chase and said, "Hey, man."
And you're talking about the Chase Park Plaza,
right
on Kings Island.
And then the one guy says they just paid him back. So one way or the other, they didn't have the wedding. However that went down.
I remember when this stuff was going on, when the violence started happening. I leave shortly after this, and I don't ever come back. But I remember the downgrade of the communities as well, because the money's not flowing through the communities, and we've got a ton of addicts. We don't have a lot of dope coming in here, and we've talked about that. So I'm not glorifying that selling dope is good for the community. It eventually destroys it, but at this point, that they got hot,
right,
and they started to get complete unrest.
Don't get me in on the government plan. We don't want to get into that conspiracy, but yeah, a lot of people are addicted, right? Everybody's addicted. People get addicted to making money. The other people are addicted to the dope, and then when you don't have either one of them, all hell breaks loose.
Right. It creates opportunities for us.
But so this and then James Williams Blue, he ends up getting unalived in Brooklyn, Illinois, at a hot dog stand outside of Roxy's.
Why did they go after those guys at the
just a beef? Just a violent beef. There's no reason on these ones. What the other ones we're gonna get into specific reasons.
Okay.
But this was just a beef that came up during my research or during talking to people. But James Williams doesn't get killed or he gets unalived, and I'm trying to stay away from the continuous because if you use a couple words too much, they silence you. So sorry for going back on different names, but James Williams ends up losing his life over in Brooklyn, Illinois, at a hot dog stand at 2:15 in the morning. That was in 2012, so if the crew that we're going to talk about had anything to do with it, it was set up from jail, but nonetheless, Blue was killed too. So, and then let's see, which one do we want to go to next? I guess we'll just kind of keep them in chronological.
Keep them in chronological
order.
And then I'm learning a little bit about this too, because I was gone in 2012, and I like to hear the backstories.
And I was gone too, so a lot of this happened after we were both gone.
You're right.
But the name Donald White was with us when we left.
He was.
We definitely knew about that.
And Willie May Allen, I remember that.
Right.
That was I remember the case. I remember it well.
The first detective I talked to called her Mae West just because of the name May. All he remembered was May. And he's like, I think her name was Mae West. And I was like, I don't know about that. But anyway, so on March 26th of 2010, now it starts getting hot here. Michael McGill, who is a fellow drug distributor with these guys along the way. They were all friends, but Michael ended up monikered with the fact that he was an informant.
Right.
And he also owed a significant amount of money to some people.
Correct.
So who do they call? They call Donald, right?
Yeah, they call the crew.
They call the crew.
The wrecking crew.
And this is in court documents, the whole bit. They called it the Donald White Drug Organization. And he gets Donald Stewart and our boy Mutt, Terrence Williams.
Right.
And Donald Stewart goes by OG.
Right.
So they set Michael McGill up in the 5200 block of Maffitt. And
he wasn't out of jail, but maybe 4 months, right? 5 months.
He ends. So they ended his life on 3/26/10, and again, the word on every word is that they owed some people some money, and right. That's how that went.
That was very interesting because we talked a little bit about this, and I won't get into some of the methods, but Michael, I remember pictures of Michael and the crew when they first started, Michael McGill, and I knew him. I mean, he wouldn't pick me up out of a lineup, but I knew him. I spoke to him. I spoke to most of those guys at the beginning, and we were investigating somebody else or a different case, and people were talking about it in prison.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting and sad as well, because I don't remember him to be a bad person in the context of violence and that. Obviously a criminal, but I remember hearing it and I was like, wow. And we kind of passed some of that information to the intel groups, and man, what a great job. And I think they solved that thing pretty quick.
I mean, it was Donald Stewart and Mutt go to jail for it.
Yeah. Now they got
later in 2013 or something. But this is all because of all the stuff that's going on. And as these homicide detectives are working these different cases, the same names are coming up and they're crossing, and then the FBI is getting involved. But so then on 7/23, so that would have been July 23rd of the same year of
2010.
Darian Williams is unalived, also in the 5200 block of Maffitt.
Yeah, is it Maffitt or Moffitt?
Maffitt. So then, but how that one went down is Gregory Lewis, who went by Nunu.
Okay.
Also a dope dealer with all these guys, drug distributor. His name came up in North County guy, and Nunu owed Darian Williams $50K. So he owed him $50,000, but to get more dope, he had to pay that $50,000. So he doesn't really want to give up $50,000 to get the dope. So he brings Darian, he lures Darian to Maffitt, and when they're going to rob him.
Mm-hmm.
The Nunu's claim is that he got Donald White and his people, arranged it through Donald White, that his people were going to come up, and Nunu was going to get an additional couple kilos and then give him the 50K or 50,000. 50K. So when he gives them the signal to come up and rob them to get the money back, well, they come up just blazing.
Wow.
And they just light him up, and the thing's over. They get the money, whatever was brought there, it all left with him, with them.
And those guys are just getting hired to do this.
Yes.
So like we're talking about, they're just like the Murder Inc. crew in New York.
Yep.
They're getting hired to do this.
They're getting money.
They're the team on the street. When you got problems, you call these guys.
Yep. Absolutely. And then, and then Donald Stewart and Terrence Mutt Williams are also convicted of that.
Right.
So they hire the same people all the time. And you're going to hear another guy by the name of Soldier Boy who gets involved. Do we ever figure out, some we know who hired them and some we don't, correct? There's so many. The guys I talked to, they had all kinds of stories but we're going through the ones that actual witnesses came forward, testified, or gave information that these guys recalled. And then let's go to now. Here's an interesting one. This one's got a lot of different stuff going on. We got a dope robbery in this one. So on 9/21, which would be, let's see, what is that, September? Yes. September of 21st of 2010. It's a very poignant day in my life. I won't say what it is, but it's a very poignant day. 9/21. What a good day for Demetric Thompson. Demetric Thompson, he lived in the 4700 block of McMillan. And they get a call the night of the 21st, and he was shot and unalived in there. But as the investigation goes on, and they found out some very interesting information as they're investigating it, right off the bat, the names of Terrence Williams and Donald White come up.
Okay.
Terrence Williams is Mutt, and Donald White, of course, Lil Don. But there's a witness that gets involved that knows exactly what was going on here and why Dimitri lost his life. And what happens is on in the week of November the 17th, which would have been about 4 days earlier.
Okay.
They get information. Donald White gets information that Glenn T. Gucci is going to get 5 kilos of heroin or a guy by the name of Pops. And at this time, they thought Pops to be Orbia Corthan. And he lived on Washington. And they knew that if Glenn T gets there, he's going to have 5 kilos of heroin.
Okay. And this is all documented, well documented.
This is all,
the police reports.
Yeah. And this is what they remember.
And okay.
And they went to try. This all went to trial.
Oh yeah, right.
And
I remember this too.
Right. So Dimitri Thompson is going to be involved on this hit. So Dimitri is the dead guy, but he was going to be involved in this hit on the 17th of this lick.
Okay.
They called it a lick. And so he was going to be there with Christopher Spates, who goes by the name of, let's see, Christopher Spates is Soldier.
Okay.
Is Soldier. So Soldier and Thompson are going to do this lick on, hold on, I'm getting this mixed up.
You're getting a little mixed up.
Yeah. It's going to be Mutt and Thompson.
Yeah.
Mutt and Thompson are originally going, my bad. Mutt and Thompson are originally going to do the lick on Glenn Teague and Pops.
Okay. And they were going to try and grab five birds of heroin.
5 birds of heroin and then bring it back and that good stuff. So, but then Mutt gets a guy by the name of Christopher Spates involved. And that's Soldier Boy. So now there's 3 of them. So there's 3 of them. They set up, and on 9/17 is when the actual lick goes down. They get in, they kick the door in, they're blazing in there. Well, Glenn Teague jumps off the 2nd floor balcony.
Oh my goodness!
And breaks his leg.
Oh no!
According to people.
Okay.
He gets away, but they get some kilos, or they get whatever they get. However, Donald White only gets about 1.5 kilos of heroin out of this, or maybe 2, somewhere in there. But he was expecting 5, and he got really mad that he didn't get 5. But also is when Thompson is done with this lick, and this is Dimitri, this ends up being a victim. He also gives an ounce of heroin to Darnell Red Lathan, which is Donald's brother, and he also gives some to Mutt.
Okay.
But now he wants money for this for some reason, and he's getting agitated that he's not being paid, and so now they and now Daryl Clemens shit is now involved also. And Daryl, the day after the robbery, Daryl Clemens and Mutt pick up Thompson, and Thompson gets the feeling that something ain't right. These guys are up to something, and what ends up happening is these guys were all behind his back, planning for this to happen, a murder that we originally talked about, and so it does end up happening. So he ends up getting killed, and there was the investigation ends up that all these guys were involved, and they set him up to be killed.
Okay.
And,
I think the really interesting thing about this stuff as well is we notice a shift in dope as well. So 99 to about 2006 were cocaine crazy.
Yes.
Right? Because we got the great source.
Just flowing it in.
And then what do we go back to?
Heroin.
We go back to heroin. Now it's Mexican heroin. It's not the white. We might have a little Colombian heroin here, but I noticed that even back then that we shifted, and that's because of the sources. Man, it's just a house of cards. And when you sit back 10 years later and 20 years later, and you put all this stuff back together, you see these trends that you can't see when they're right in front of you. And and they went back to the heroin.
Right. Yep. And then another guy said that Thompson had once robbed Teague. Teague thought that Thompson had robbed him for $250K along the way too. So they were always thinking the thought plan is that they knew they were going to kill Thompson after this lick right away, well before the lick was even done. They were just using Thompson to help with the lick, and then they were going to take care of him afterwards. Wow. That was the plan.
Well, I'll talk about, just like the mob hits, you got to go kill your brother.
Right.
You're sitting drinking beers with them one day, and the next day you're putting a bullet in their head.
Right. That's not. Yeah, that's wild.
There's a lot of similarities.
Wild stuff, brother. But then later on in these investigations, just so everybody knows, is that all this information that I just gave you wasn't gotten the day after.
No,
this takes like months of and some over a year to get all this information together. And as they're working these cases and getting this information, they brought Donald White in, and they brought Spates in, and they brought all these guys in. But they're not saying nothing, so they have to let them go, and then they have to go get more evidence. And
it was one of the, I think it was the first time. It was the first time that they had killer crews that worked for anybody.
Right. I mean, these guys were getting $10K a pop apparently, or more. And then if they do the robbery, obviously they get
they get the robbery or whatever's in the car, right, or the money. Yeah, yep. and they were working for all different groups.
Yep.
It was just strictly for money for them. And then they would get the ancillary benefits of whatever dope. It's almost, Eric called them one time, they're serial killers. These, I think I hate to say they like it, but I think they like it, or like the power.
I think it's the rush, the adrenaline rush, maybe. And then it is part of the business, but sometimes like guys like this, they're like, hey man, they'll do it to anybody.
Yeah.
And then the thing too is that, all these other people that are hiring them, why not?
Right.
For $10,000, I don't got to get involved if it works.
Right.
Well, it did work for a while.
It did. It was the summer of blood. It was a bad summer. It went for about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. Or at least when we started to, your guys started to figure out and put it all together.
Nope.
They might have done it a little bit longer, but boy, once that violence starts to hit in the communities, like what's going on, law enforcement's all over.
Right. And then 8/23 of 11, and this is the last one. But 8/23 of 11, Angie Young, young lady, was murdered at the White Castles at Natural Bridge and Kings Highway.
Oh.
And so her boyfriend is a guy by the name of Leon Moss. And Leon was an associate of Donald White through drug dealing, all this, the friends and drug distributors together. I think it was described to me that Leon was a, distributor for Donald.
Okay.
But a friend, they're all friends. And that was her. He used to run with Angie Young, but had assaulted her. Or there's something going on there there was a domestic case that he thought that he was going to go away for a long period of time.
Okay.
And so he does what everybody else did, and he calls Donald, Lil Don, and Lil Don, calls Christopher Spates, and Christopher Spates is Soldier Boy.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up, he's just a hitman for I'm sure he's dealing dope too, but from everybody that I've talked to, he's basically just a hitman for Donald, and deals dope on the side. But and then Lil Don ends up paying Christopher Spates, Soldier Boy, $7,500 for the hit. And there was actually one of the people that they talked to was there when he paid him. And he's like, this is what you get for putting in the work. And so
wow,
there was that. And then, but during this investigation, as this thing's going on, is that Donald White and is also being investigated by the FBI for drug sales.
Okay.
So they're crossing all kinds of information. They're, the police department's getting information from the FBI on however they're getting their information through CIs or whatever it was. But there's a good, the detectives were saying there was a good flow of information that they were able to get on all these guys. And everybody knows how that is that, whether they're informants or whether there was a wire up or anyway they were doing it, there was good information they were getting.
Right.
So it ends up that it's the same old people. Christopher Spates, got hired by Donald White, and then Moss, paid him. So they all end up going to jail for that.
What's really cool too. I love, one of the things I really love about doing these, especially with you and meeting the guys again and kind of going through some of the old reports, is now you get to sit back and we see the bigger picture.
Yep.
No, and we don't know it 1,000%, but the one thing that pops in my mind, and we started this with the BMF, and there was no BMF without St. Louis. Well, this is great indication, and it's splitting.
Right.
Our tight group at the beginning is now fractured.
Right. And now they start making all these mistakes and doing anything for money. Basically, you'd rather, when that dope was flowing in, that was their money.
Absolutely.
And then when that starts going the other way, you got people robbing people and setting people up.
Right.
One of the things that I found interesting during the investigation too is that at one point in time, Donald White gets sent to Jennings, the federal facility over there, federal holdover or whatever they call it.
Nobody wanted to go to Jennings.
Well, and then, but Donald White gets tight with a guard and smuggles in a cell phone.
Oh boy!
And I think that guard ended up going to jail too.
Oh my goodness!
I didn't get his name, but it appeared that he went to jail too.
I think you can have them in prison now. I think you can have cell phones.
I have no idea.
I don't know either.
No, we did get a request that we put our podcast on JPay and Securus, so prisoners could listen to it. But I tried, and then we can't do it.
Oh, you'll have to figure it out if you can.
If anybody knows anything about it, let me know. We'll gladly download it on it.
I would say that we're not the most technically advanced.
Oh hell no.
Group.
Here's a couple other interesting tidbits from the whole thing. As you remember, when I had said that Mark Bianalino was the first guy to
correct.
The first guy basically that we're talking about that he got.
But Mark came with us.
Yeah,
Mark.
He got Donald when he was working with the city, but then he gets transferred to DEA a couple years later while Donald's in prison. Well, when Donald gets out, of course, it kicks up again. The investigations and he ends up when he gets out of prison living at 5631 Pershing in the exact same place that Mark Bianalino was in the academy.
You can't
where he lived at.
That's insane.
So that's
exact same apartment.
A little tidbit. But Donald Stewart, the OG that killed, that was involved in the killing of who did they? The first one that I mentioned, the Donald White organization, the Darian Williams and Michael McGill.
Right.
Donald Stewart. That when this thing all comes to an end, they're obviously trying to look for everybody. Donald was on the run, and they tracked him through his mom's EBT card.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
my goodness!
Pretty cool. And then they went over to get him, and Lanham was knocked on the door because they think they were just going to go talk to the mom, right?
Okay.
And the mom was going to, hey, where's your card? They opened the door, and Eric looked up and he had lost a lot of weight. And he goes, Donald? And Donald tried to shut the door on him. And he was just put in there. Not today, Donald. And he said that there was a very large marshal with him. That once he put his foot in the door, the marshal, used to be a middle linebacker or something.
Jesus.
Just obliterated the door, and Donald went flying.
Oh my goodness!
Like he got hit by Ray Nitschke. That's the Chicago, right?
I know.
He's Green Bay.
Green Bay.
Yeah, yep.
Midwest.
But that's just, we try to keep them short, so you're not sitting here for 45 minutes or an hour. We try to keep these episodes short, and our Mondays are a little longer. But one of the things we wanted to ask you guys, and we were talking about, is would you like us to do a live show, towards the end of this, where you can ask us questions, get a couple of the other investigators up here, and maybe go live on YouTube 7:00 one night.
Yeah.
But we'd have to give it some thought and get your guys' feedback on it. But we'd be willing to do that if the feedback's good. That's something that you guys would enjoy. I'm sure the questions and the insults will be different. You can go off of the BMF too. Hey, I remember you two motherfuckers.
Yeah, that would be great.
But that's okay too. Or we got thick skin. We're all right.
Yeah, I think we're looking at bringing back some federal FIDO stuff after we're done with this. We're going to do we're going to test the waters. So we might do something on Coldwater Creek. We might do something on Times Beach and talk a little bit about
just a little different stuff. But we're going to keep the dope and the unalivings going, and just the different cases that you guys can find interesting. But
and I think we're going to bring in, when we do a little bit of the Federal Fridays, where we just figured out how to merge and have people call in, so we can have some of our buddies all over the world come in and tell a story or talk, and you can get an insight into something outside of St. Louis if you like, and see what's out there.
Absolutely. But we still got a lot of good cases in
St.
Louis.
Well, I really like the ones where you dive deep into the intel stuff, because those guys they've been fantastic, and they're all the same guys.
Right.
It's the same guys that were there when we were here in 2005 through 11. It's the same guys.
But it's just like we pointed out, but it was just amazing to me that the violence doesn't kick off amongst these people until the dope's gone.
It is.
And you know, when you're used to, and then say somebody gets their hand on 100 keys, well, then who do you got all your friends out there starving for 20?
Yeah.
You know, who do you give them to? And then now there people getting mad at each other. Or if you could connect, and now it's your connect. And but yeah, these guys, they were survivors and hustlers. And some of them, not all of them survived, obviously, as you heard. But
and
you know, but you feel bad. You know, the gal, she wasn't a dope dealer. And
no,
to my knowledge, I asked, and I said, was she in the game? No, she wasn't in the game. She was just a victim of a domestic violence where the dude thought he was going to do a lot of time, and he thought, I'll just call my boy. I'll call Murder Inc.
St.
See
Louis
what they got
Murder
going.
Inc.
Yeah,
St. Louis Murder Inc.
See what's popping. But either next week we're going to try the Duran case, dude. That thing's it's just one of them things where you look at it and you're like, I don't even want to delve into this freaking thing.
It gets pretty good, and it's the last of the giants.
Yeah, it was early though. That was one of the first takeoffs. That was one of the first significant nicks in BMF.
Yeah.
But again, you didn't know that J-Bo side, because when that dope was flying, they stayed under the radar screen. You knew they were dope men, but they had a great system working. It was very hard for us to catch. But then when that dope stopped, they started, they started going different directions, and then, that's where we had a lot of our success.
It is, and when leadership goes, there was little tiny things. Leadership goes. Yeah, this stuff is. I've actually talked to, the producers of the BMF show, and had long conversations with them, and I always push with you as well. We always push about the St. Louis part of the BMF, and I think it's just absolutely fascinating. And I love now that we can sit back and go through the volumes and volumes of information and data and papers and kind of draw those little things out that, God, you wish you could see when it's right in front of you 15 years ago, but you're running around.
I don't know. We didn't know what we didn't know.
No.
And we didn't know a lot. That's what we're finding out now, is we didn't know a lot. And how these guys were all tied together. They were tied together as a friendship, but they were also, we claim that they were superfluously involved in BMF, which they all were, so it's been fun.
It's been a
lot
time.
Of fun. And, we're hoping to wrap this BMF thing up in about another, 3 shows, 10 total?
Yeah, maybe
2, 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
We got some good and other interesting stories. We got the Stephen Henderson story, which will be fun.
Oh, that's a great story.
Leo Turntine was involved in that.
That's a great story.
Seized, a lot of dope. And what was good about that, it wasn't a wire. It was about 3 days of work. We ran 3 complete days, but it was a successful 3 days.
Talk about somebody keeping their money right. The little Post-it notes with the dollar amounts on them. Yep. Yeah, that's a good little story.
Nope. And then we got the Duran one, and then I think we'll probably finish with the Cuffy one.
Okay.
But there'll be some other ones, and the ones that we missed, maybe we cover them on another Federal Friday down the road. Maybe their cases, because a lot of their cases are so short that you can't really do a show
Correct.
on. Correct. Because it was boom, 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 and they're locked up. And, okay.
And this one's good too, because we get to break it down. And in the 10 shows, we're trying to break it down and show you some of the chess moves that happened, and then some of the chess pieces that fell.
Yeah. And just the interesting, everybody, it appears that a lot of people are interested in the narcotic trafficking game that's tied with unalivings. It's tied with,
unalivings.
We got the Roxy's in there. We got the stripper in there. So that's always good. If you can.
What hot dog? Is that hot dog place still open over there?
Probably closed after that. No, but it's been fun. And then again, let us know about that live show if you guys want to, if it's something that you guys would be interested in. And other than that, like, subscribe, and share. We appreciate that. That's all we ask. And
yeah, thanks for letting us have fun up here.
Yep. We'll see you guys next week.
Cheers.
Peace.